Hello, and welcome to this conversation. I'm Rabbi Peter Rubinstein. I'm director of Jewish community and of the Bronfman Center at the 92nd Street Y here in New York. And it is really an amazing pleasure and especially poignant to have His Eminence Timothy Cardinal Dolan this evening. Since his being named as Archbishop of New York just weeks over 11 years ago, I think it is, Cardinal, that Cardinal Dolan has become an acclaimed religious leader of, and especially more important, a uniting force here in New York City, and I would think of the Catholic Church worldwide. But beyond his title, I personally would vouch for Cardinal Dolan as an extraordinary person in the way of people and relationships. He has become a friend to so many of us across the widest spectrum of religious leadership who take him as our own with tremendous affection. Your Eminence, I'm so grateful to have you here to this talk sponsored not only by the 92nd Street Y, but by the Archdiocese of New York City as well. Welcome.
Well, Rabbi Rubinstein, thank you for the invitation. We've got a good record going. You and I have been together, I think 3 or 4 times at the 92nd Street Y. I relish them. I enjoy them. I appreciate being included. I just miss being with you in person because you usually have a nice reception ahead of time and after.
Well, we always have the proper things to drink, that's for sure.
That's for sure.
Yeah, I am so grateful. You know, when we first scheduled this, it was going to be on a topic that's still relevant, but not quite as relevant as what we're facing now. You and I had our last public conversation at the Y just about 2 years ago, when we were facing in this nation, and since then, this nation and this world have changed radically. As a matter of fact, even in the weeks since we planned this date, the world has even changed more radically. The onslaught of the COVID-19 virus has sparked untold and unexpected forces, not the least of which involve matters of faith and adversity and community, which is the subject, I hope, of tonight's conversation. So I want to start with a quote from Harold Kushner, Rabbi Harold Kushner, who wrote, "When bad things happen to good people." And this is what he said: "God does not cause our misfortunes. Some are caused by bad luck, some are caused by bad people, and some are simply an inevitable consequence of our being human and being mortal. Because the tragedy is not God's will, we need not feel hurt or betrayed by God when tragedy strikes. We can turn to him for help in overcoming it precisely because we can tell ourselves that God is as outraged by it as we are." So both of our religions, both Catholicism and Judaism, have had their moments of incredible periods of adversity. So let's talk about what our faith, and then my question to you, what does your faith teach about adversity and the responses to it? Do we view them as acts of God or man? And if neither, then why?
Yeah. First of all, thanks for a quote from Rabbi Kushner's book, Why Bad Things Happen to Good People. It happens to be one of my favorites. And I would, to what he just said, what you just read, Rabbi, I would say, you bet. He says it for sure. One of the things I find today when I meet with people is they'll say to me, "Oh, Cardinal Dolan, what did I do wrong to have God punish me like this?" Whether it be with the coronavirus, whether it be a loved one with the coronavirus. And I have to say, that's not the way God works. That's not the way our God works. If we had such a vindictive God, I don't know if I'd be able to believe in him as our loving Father. And I do believe in him as my loving Father. So I don't think he's vindictive. He, as Rabbi Kushner just said, he might allow suffering to happen because it is a free world, that he gave freedom to the world. But he doesn't will it. He doesn't want it. We just had a powerful reading at Mass the Sunday before yesterday, Rabbi, the 5th Sunday of Lent, where Jesus, whom, as you know, we believe is the Son of God, where Jesus raised Lazarus from the dead, his good friend Lazarus. And when he's at the tomb in Bethany, just about 2 miles outside Jerusalem, he cries. And the people are always moved by that, Rabbi. They say, isn't Jesus divine? And I say, yes, he is. He's true God and true man. And they say, but he cried. And I said, yes, we have a God who cries. And I think you believe that too. This isn't the way God intended things. One of the things I go back to all the time, thank you to our Jewish brothers and sisters, is the book of Genesis. We see what God intended at the beginning. We were to be in harmony. We were to be in friendship with him. He didn't want death. He didn't want sickness. He didn't want evil. He didn't want selfishness. He didn't want sin. He intended original goodness. And of course, our parents chose not to follow that. And humanity, creatures, and creation are fractured. All right? God, through the people of Israel, through his son Jesus, set about to restore what he had intended, and that restoration is still going on. But that's powerful for us to recall that God doesn't intend this. He wants healing. He wants good. He wants light. He wants life. He doesn't want darkness and death and evil and sickness. And he does his best to see that it's not there. I think, Peter, if people are going to say, oh my God, how could God allow all this evil? We could retort, you and I, as believers in the God of Israel, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and Jesus. We could say, but think how much good God empowers, this selfless, sacrificial generosity that we see in our physicians, in our healthcare workers, in our rescuers. That's all inspired by God's goodness. So let's not forget that brightness that's there in a time of darkness.
Yeah, it's interesting. This is one of those times, and we have this Yiddish word "beshert." It was destined. That Easter and Holy Week and Passover are coming at exactly the same time. And Holy Week, I believe, started today, and Easter is on Sunday.
Yeah.
And Pesach, the holiday, the festival of Passover, is going to start Wednesday night, and so Wednesday and Thursday, and both have messianic tones to them. Both have a sense that they're holidays of renewal, they're holidays of rebirth, they're holidays of aspiration. At the end of the Passover Seder, you will always say Hashanah Ba'ah B'Yerushalayim, next year in Jerusalem. But it's not the physical Jerusalem we're talking about. It is the ethereal Jerusalem, that time when people will be together and there will be peace and harmony. So I believe that this is a very powerful moment, certainly in our history of our nation, but also in the history of our particular faiths. Judaism, of course, has suffered some terrible tragedies throughout our time. But the one thing that I think I keep coming back to, I can't say we keep coming back to, is we're still here. And not great in numbers, but we're still here. And there's an expression in Hebrew, Gam zeh ya'avor, this too shall pass. Mm-hmm. And we will go on after this.
Way to go. It is very providential, Rabbi Rubinstein, that we would have Passover and Easter coterminous this year. Now, that's no accident, because Jesus' suffering, death, and resurrection took place within the Passover ritual, but that doesn't always happen calendar-wise. Some people have said, and I don't know if they've said it to you, oh, it's a shame that the coronavirus is ruining our Passover, is ruining Holy Week and Easter. And I said, well, wait a minute. In many ways, these two great feasts are accenting the meaning of what it's all about. You just mentioned it. For you, if I understand, you're speaking about the passing over, the deliverance of God's people from slavery, from darkness, from death in Egypt, to promise and hope and new life in Israel. And for us, Jesus, of course, passes over from the degradation, the darkness, the death of Good Friday, to the new life of resurrection on Easter Sunday, a victory which he wants to share with all of us. So, oh my, we're going through that now, with the suffering, with the adversity, with the loneliness, with the isolation that the people of Israel went through, that the Christian people have gone through, that Jesus went through. So I find it extraordinarily meaningful. And let's not forget, too, that we've got the backdrop of what? Nature. Because nature's going through winter, to spring, March to April, darkness to light, the morbidity of winter with new growth. I was out today, Peter, at a cemetery at the graveside to bury one of our priests, keeping distance and all, folks. But and coming back, I'm seeing all the flowers in bloom. I'm thinking, this is Passover, this is Easter, this is the moving on from winter to spring. So it kind of all blends together. God's a great choreographer, isn't he?
Well, I've never actually thought about God dancing, but yes, in certain ways that's true. The Hasidim always express joy through dancing, so dancing is also part of our DNA. But I was thinking as you talked about it, a couple of weeks I made a video and I talked about the difference between social distance and soulful distance. Social distance, pulls us apart for the purpose of sustaining life and health. And soulful distance actually draws us together for the purpose of restoring our humanity. And so we're in a time now where this issue of soulful distance is really important. And the question is, how do we synthesize the two right now in this year? How do we have virtual worship? Does it work? And what does that mean about community?
Well, it does work, doesn't it, Rabbi Rubinstein? But it doesn't work as well as being together, and we got to admit that. You and I, Jews and Christians, Catholics and Jews, are very much into ritual. We're very much into community. We're very much into togetherness. Nothing can beat being at synagogue. Nothing can beat being at your parish church on Sunday. And when you don't have that, you miss it big time. You're going to miss the Seder, you were telling me, the opening night of Passover. You're going to do one virtual, but didn't you tell me you're doing 10 time zones?
That's right. We're over tens of time zones.
Boy, it's hardly going to be perfect. And I'm the same now. I got a new little grandniece, and I just want to hug her, and I get to see her like this on Skype, but I sometimes think I'm sadder than ever that I can't hug her and hold her and kiss her, because darn it, we're tactile people. There's a physicalness to us that we need to admit that we miss. That having been said, we're making lemonade out of lemons, because boy, a lot of our folks are saying we kind of enjoy the virtual mass. We like tuning into your prayers at night. We like getting connected with your messages and your sermons. And I'm sure your colleagues in the ministry would say the same, Rabbi Rubinstein. But it's not quite the same. I like what you hinted at, though, because isn't this a reminder that love and trust, connection, togetherness doesn't have to be physical, all right? I know right now, and I'm thinking of her, a beautiful young wife and mother in her late 20s. She's got 2 little kids under 4, and her husband is off in service at one of our foreign destinations. I can't say which one it is because it's secret. She misses him deeply, but she tells me, I don't know if I've ever felt closer to him. I don't know if our love has ever been so powerful. And she tunes in as often as she can when they would Skype together, when they would speak, even good old-fashioned letters. But there is that bond there that does not always depend on the physical, And I think that's what we're tapping into now. You and I call that the spiritual. You and I call that the soulful. Right. You and I call that the mystical. And that's very, very powerful.
As I listen to you, I'm thinking that you would love to hold that, but that baby that was just born, wouldn't you just want to pinch its cheeks? I mean,
I love her because her cheeks are fatter than mine. So I just want
to. No, that's the one thing. You'll have your opportunity, I promise. So, and I just, I feel badly for that child. That child's going to get their cheeks pinched to eternity. But I'm interested in this whole issue of community. We very often, I remember when I was in California, they were trying to define communities, and the closest they could get was, in California at least, zip codes. A community was a zip code. So one thing that makes community is geographical presence, right? Closeness to each other, whether it's in the synagogue as part of the minyan or at mass in the church. But with what we're going through now, what new words would you use to define community? And I would ask you this, is this virtual expression of community going to endure beyond this crisis now? And
I'd like to think so. I think you and I, who are pastors, are looking for what's going to be the long-range implications of the trauma that we're going through now, especially the impact that it may have on the spirit, on religion, on faith. And I'd like to think that it's going to have a positive impact. That often happens in national trauma and emergency. It certainly happened after the Second World War. I'm reading that new biography, excellent, Peter, on Rabbi Joshua Heschel. It just came out, and of course he was up with Billy Graham and Norman Vincent Peale and Fulton Sheen in that revival of religion after the Second World War.
And he walked on the front lines of the Civil Rights March.
That he did in Selma. Yes, he did. And I'm just thinking, is that going to happen now? What new words come through, you ask me? I think we usually think community is born out of happy occasions. And yes, it is, right? The Shabbat service, a bar mitzvah, a marriage. But we also think community comes out of adversity. I always feel a community when I walk into my doctor's waiting room. Everybody, I'm thinking, I don't really know these people, but we're all kind of, obviously, there's something wrong with them. They're here because they're sick or they're worried that they're sick, and so am I. And there's kind of a subtle community there because we're suffering something together. We might not know what it is. And I wonder, I just sense now that there's a real dominant sense of connection, community, whatever word you want to use, among all of us. I have talked to people over the last 3 weeks of isolation. I've called and emailed people that I haven't spoken with for years, simply out of love and concern. And I think that's a good thing that is coming. And darn it, that's community. That's connectivity. That's solidarity, that great word that Pope St. John Paul II made famous, solidarity. We are together. When I'm called, as I am these days, to speak to a more diverse audience, like if I'm being interviewed on a news program, and they'll say, hey, Cardinal Dolan, can you say a prayer for all of us, no matter what religion or none at all? I say, well, you know what? We Americans say we are one nation under God. One nation. That's something powerful. That's a sense of community. That means we look to him as sovereign. We're under him, and that means we're together because we're all under the same Lord. That connection and solidarity, I think, is driven home these days.
Yeah, I want to follow up on that, Tim. Your Eminence. So one of the things that I'm finding interestingly is that there's probably a greater expression of humility and empathy among people now than I actually understood before, and certainly for the have-nots in our society. You and I live in a city where very often we're mingling with the haves. We're aware of the have-nots, but I'm thinking simple things like, how do people social distance if they're living in projects, in the NYCHA housing? And does that somehow, is this going to get translated into something more when we're over this hump and back into our lives? So do you think this is enduring?
You mean for good or bad, Peter? In other words,
for good. Empathy, awareness, social justice.
Yes, I think it is. I was talking to a lady the other day who said, I've lived here for 16 years. She said, I've never said hello to my neighbor. I don't even know her name. We might nod to each other. There's no antipathy there. But at every morning at 8 o'clock, I pound on the wall twice and she pounds back. And she said, that's sort of our little prearranged schedule. So I think they must have, right for isolation, they must have passed in the hall and said, I guess it's just the two of us. Why don't I not knock on the wall twice every morning at 8? And if you're okay, we'll do it back so at least we can keep track. She says to me on the phone, I'm looking forward when this is over of giving her a hug and saying, let's go out for lunch. So I hope this empathy really, really continues. And I don't think we're being naive if we think that it will not. Even from a human point of view, there's such a that we miss that human contact, that we're eager for company and friendship. Even that's going to drive us. When you couple that with something moral or spiritual, I think it will be enduring.
I'm wondering, but the other part of this that concerns me a little bit, and I don't want to dwell on this part of it, is the level of animus that is being expressed by certain people in terms of, the Chinese and online, the attacks on Jews for having causes, right? I mean, so how do you factor that in? And just in terms of humanity, now I think we both have logical explanations for it, but if you're on the receiving end of it, the logical explanation doesn't help.
No, there's always going to be some of these. I don't know. I'm looking for charitable words. These obnoxious, small-minded people. That certainly wasn't very charitable, but it was a lot more than what I was thinking.
We're both from a community. We would understand what the words we would say.
Be there, and the revulsion that 99% of the people feel over that, I think, is indicative that that's not where we're at. And these people are a very distinct minority that, darn it, we're not going to let them pollute the pond because they don't represent the rest of us. I hope that's the case.
Yeah, there was a story of Leo Beck, who was a very extraordinary philosopher, came out of Germany, and he was put in Theresienstadt. And he was offered release because he was well known, and the Nazis thought he would stay there. And he said he refused to be refused to be released. He wanted to stay with his community, and that's actually among the words he used. He wanted to be with them in that concentration camp. He needed to hear their stories, hold their hands, give them a hug, and he knew that his presence gave them hope. Do you think that's the role of clergy nowadays?
Yes, it is. When you're telling me that story, Rabbi, we have one, and I can't remember his name now, but he was a curé, a pastor in a small French village in the 19th century, and the caretaker of the parish came to him and confessed that he had murdered a woman in the village. When the dead woman was found, the man who did the murder had also planted evidence that was bad for the pastor, and he was convicted of the murder and sent to Devil's Island. Now, let me try to make this quick. He's on Devil's Island, which is one of the worst places in the world, and the guy, the gardener, the murderer, the real murderer, ends up being sent there for another crime. You're following me?
Yeah.
This man is dying. He calls for the priest. He makes his final confession to the priest, and he confesses to the priest, I'm the one that set you up, and I'm the one that lied about your murder. And he's yelling at all the villagers. He said, hear me out here. Father did not do the murder. I did, and I framed him for it. He died. You're getting the point of my story, like your friend Leo Beck. That priest was saying, okay, the boat leaves tomorrow, you're free. He said, no, I'm going to stay here. I love these people. I've been here for 20 years. I get the feeling they kind of need me, and I want to be here with them. So thanks, but no thanks. Yeah, I hope we do. It's interesting, Peter, when I try to take a walk every day. Most of the time I just do it in my sweatsuit or depending on the weather. These days I am walking around dressed as a priest. And people from a distance, again, everybody's respecting that, will say to me, oh, hello, Father, or if they know me, they'll say, oh, hi, Cardinal Dolan, would you pray over me? Again, with a distance, would you give me a blessing? They look to us as sort of reminders of the divine. Now, we know, you and I know that we're hardly that. We know that we're far from that. But you and I also are grateful for that sacred call that we have to be that for people. And boy, we don't want to let them down in a time like this.
Yeah, and I have a sense that actually more and more people, although they're not clergy, are taking the role that we imagine for ourselves as a there's a story in the Talmud, in the Jewish tradition, in which somebody goes to a leper colony and says, so look at those people out there. So when is the Messiah going to come? And the rabbi turned to him and said, see those people wrapping the wounds of those lepers? That's the Messiah.
Way to
And
go.
I think that we each have the opportunity to, I call it being a Messiah for the moment, right? It's different. Yeah, and I just think of all the people that are making decisions. Doctors, I read the story, doctors who have to make a decision about taking care of their patients and perhaps endangering the lives of their family.
Yeah. I made just some of those videos, Rabbi for the police department and the New York Fire Department. Right. And I said, we're all told to stay indoors and lock the door. We're all told to avoid people. And you are out there lifting people up. You are running towards danger. You're in the midst of it. And I said, thank you for reminding us of the dignity of the human person, the sacredness of human life. You're right. They are agencies of the divine. You and I, Jews and Christians, have a beautiful theology that God usually acts through others, okay? St. Thomas Aquinas gave it a fancy term, secondary causality. He's working through doctors. He's working through the garbage collectors, okay, who are coming around and getting rid of some of this toxic stuff. He's working through the police. He's working through the rescue. I hope in some way he's working through two awkward servants, you and me, in words that we might share that might offer people some hope and confidence. So, Emmanuel, God is everywhere, and he's acting through all of us.
Yeah, I think we're at a time, I'm thinking about this issue of community. What happens at 7 o'clock in New York City every night is an incredible demonstration of community in a way we would never have expected, especially in New York City. And I think that people have gained an awareness, probably for the first time. You mentioned the Department of Sanitation. People are saying thank you to them and the delivery people that were invisible. And suddenly these are the people who are supporting our lives in ways that we never took knowledge of before.
Rabbi, can I go back to something you mentioned earlier, because I thought this is worth pursuing. You used the word humility. We're all being taught in a very a sledgehammer way. Humility, dependence, vulnerability. We all know we're vulnerable, okay? We all know we're weak, that we could be susceptible to something toxic and detrimental. That is teaching us humility. Our God told us there is a God and you're not God. All right. I am he. I am the Lord thy God. Do not have strange ones before me. We all like to flirt with omniscience and omnipotence. We want to feel that we know everything. We want to believe that we are all powerful, okay? We don't like people saying you can't do something. This is teaching us that we're not know-it-alls, okay? And we're not in charge of everything. My grandpa used to say when I was a kid, he said, Tim, while we know that we're not in charge of everything, the weather, because there ain't a blooming thing we can do about it. The weather is in charge no matter what we do. That's what we're learning now. And doesn't that bring some humility and vulnerability?
Yeah, I think it does. I mean, the fact of the matter is it's very difficult, I think, for people, certainly certain people, to give up control or to we didn't voluntarily give up control, but not to have control. We're taught from the time we're raised, especially in certain levels of society, you can do anything you want. You just, you become a leader and you have control over. And then suddenly we're humbled by the fact that, no, you know what? As Mel Brooks used to say in the 2013-year-old man, he said, there's somebody bigger than Irving, right? I'm not going to tell you the whole story.
We're seeing now, Rabbi, to whom we usually attribute omniscience, like physicians, scientists, medical professionals, who are standing in front of us every day saying, I don't know. I don't know where this comes from. I don't know what can kill this virus. I don't know. We're not used to that. We're even, believe it or not, looking at politicians who rarely want to admit that they are not in control and that they don't know something, say to all of us, I don't know. I don't know when this is going to peak. I don't know how the economy is going to do afterwards. I find that kind of refreshing. Because we like to attribute an omniscience and omnipotence to ourselves and other people.
Yeah. I mean, you raised the issue of leadership, which was not going to be part of our discussion, but what do you think makes a great leader? I mean, I believe you're a great leader, right? So what is leadership about, and what should it be about at this time?
Well, I tell you this, I have to say this too, and I'm not used to this, Rabbi. I really want to compliment our political leaders. I might have disagreements with them in other areas. Believe me, I do. But Governor Cuomo, Mayor de Blasio, even President Trump, I think they're trying their best. They're working hard, and they're. I admire immensely what they're doing. When I see them in action, and when I see a leader doing something that I admire, I ask the same question you just asked of me. What is it? For one, I admire an honesty that somebody is simply going to. Tell us the truth. I'm reading that new book on Jimmy Carter that was written by Stuart Eisenstadt, who was close to him. And remember, you and I go back that far. He captivated the nation simply by saying, "I will never lie to you. I will never lie to you." And after Watergate and everything, that was a powerful promise that Americans that captivated the American electorate. Well, I appreciate that honesty. But number two, I really appreciate a humility. To say, look, there's certain things I can do something about. There's certain things that I'm unable to do. But thirdly, I admire a challenge in a leader, that a leader's able to see what's most noble, what's most decent, what's most promising within the human person, and to call it forth,
Yeah, I just want to clarify, and do you think vulnerability, expressions of vulnerability makes for a great leader too?
I do. I don't know if vulnerability and humility are synonyms, but I think admitting that we're vulnerable is a part of it. I saw Governor Cuomo the other day say, I'm tired, I'm exhausted, I'm at my wit's end. I admired that. We're not used to that, and I don't think he's always shown that, but I sure admire that leadership now.
Oh, he's doing great now.
Yeah.
Listen, let's get back to the matter of faith. What's the place of prayer at this time? Do we expect that we should pray to God to stop this horror, or what do we pray for?
Yeah. Well, Peter, I'll try to answer that if you promise me you'll weigh in on it too, because I would respect very much your version on it too. And I think Catholics and Jews are pretty close here. First of all, when you and I pray, we realize that we're babies, we're children. God is our Father. So sometimes we don't exactly know what to say. And we say that to God. We say, I admire your leaders in the Jewish scriptures, Moses and Abraham, and they argued with God. They said, dear God, I don't know what's going on. I love you. I trust you, but I don't quite understand this. Why is everybody getting sick? Why can't we find a cure for this? Why is everybody topsy-turvy? Doesn't seem a way to run a railroad. But in spite of that, dear Lord, I trust you. And I love you, and I know it's all in your hands, and it's going to work out. So that trust, we saw it in Job, in your scriptures. We see that powerfully in Job. Number two, I don't think we should ever be afraid to directly ask God something. We always know that He has His way, He has His will, but we'd say, Lord, I don't pretend to know that, and here, could I just ask you to consider this? Stop this virus, heal these people, give our physicians and our healthcare workers energy and strength that they need, give those who are mourning a dose of confidence and light. And thirdly, we always end with an act of trust. We're going to have Friday, Rabbi Rubinstein, on Good Friday, when we read the Passion, we're going to see Jesus, the Son of God, from the cross, and he's going to shout out, my God, why have you abandoned me? He's quoting a psalm because Jesus was a faithful Jew.
Right.
My God, why have you abandoned me? And about 10 seconds later, he's going to say, Father, into your hands I commend my spirit, and he dies. Now, this seems almost opposite, doesn't it? On the one hand, he might seem to be desperate. He might seem to be questioning God. He might seem to be angry with God. And he says, my God, why have you forsaken me? But yet his last prayer is always trust. Father, into your hands I commend my spirit. And that's always, I think, the basic character of prayer. Trust. Jesus said, fear is useless. What is needed is trust. So I think trust is always that third, final, bottom line of our prayer.
Yeah, you asked me, and I as a friend, Tim, I will always do what you ask of me to weigh in on this. Right? I think part of us wants to believe that something's in control, and so we will ask God for things. But I believe that the things that we can pray for the best are the things that we have power over ourselves. Strength to, for us to kind of, bring forth our strength, for us to be worthy of fighting a disease and being strong for those who have the disease. I think it's a matter of hope, that we can pray for hope and optimism. Those are the things that we have some control over. And lastly, I'll share with you my favorite line. Everybody who knows me knows it's my favorite line. It's really it's like my mantra. The last line of the Adon Olam prayer. It's a song that we sing sometimes. It's Adonai li v'lo ira. God is with me, and I will not be afraid.
Beautiful.
And to me, that's that. And I say that every day. Especially those times when, I think we all have those moments when you say, I just can't go on. I'm exhausted. I just can't. I don't know what to do with this person. How do I comfort them when I can't give them a hug, which you and I are so accustomed to doing? I think that God is with me and I will not be afraid allows me to take the next step. And I feel better.
Let me ask you to make sure I understand, because I find that potent. In other words, you're saying that in many ways, if I understand you, Rabbi, with this meaning of prayer as things we have power over, you're saying God's already given me a lot of gifts. God's already answered a lot of prayers for me. Deep down inside, he's given me strength. He's given me wisdom. He's given me joy. He's given me confidence. My prayer almost is to unbuckle those, to unleash those, because they're down there. That's kind of what you mean?
That's correct. And that I'm not alone. I think that for me is very important. I mean, I feel that very powerfully in this, kind of a mystical way, and I don't consider myself a mystic, that when I'm walking into that room to comfort somebody and I have no idea, I don't have a playbook as to how, none of us have a playbook for this time. How do we deal with this? It's that, I don't know, that I am not alone. That God is giving me the strength to do this, and I will find my way, whether it's by direction of God or not, or implanted within me. I have the ability to take the next step. And that's, at that point, all I need.
I like that. Peter, a recovering alcoholic to whom I was close to in a pastoral counseling situation, said to me, he must know what you just said, because he said, he said, yes, the 12-step program says we submit to a higher power, but it dawned on me that the higher power had already answered my prayer. This is not the way he made me to be an addict. This is not the way he made me. I need to return to the person that he created. And that he had some power over that, he felt, to kind of allow God to call him back to the original purpose. So that's I think a sequel to what you were saying in that version of prayer.
Well, I like the way you framed it. I'll use that as well. So just a personal question. So is there a prayer that you favor? For what do you pray?
Yeah, there would be some. And you know where I get them? Uh, we have a lot of prayers, and like you, a lot of our prayers are set. So there would be ritual prayers that I love and depend on. In fact, every day we priests have made a promise to pray what we call the divine office, which would take us about an hour, although it's interspersed throughout the day. There would be, we call it the liturgy of the hours. So there's morning prayer, there's midday prayer, there's evening prayer, there's prayer before you go to bed. And most of them, Rabbi, are the Psalms, your Psalms. We plagiarize those from you, and we love them.
Oh, we're honored that you do.
You are a great library. We borrow everything from you, and I love that buffet of the Psalms. But you know what I do? You asked me to get a little personal here, and I will. I'm a great fan of St. Peter. All right, St. Peter, we believe he was the first pope. He was the head of the apostles, and he was a big, bumbling sinner. Okay, he denied Jesus 3 times on the very night that he was arrested. Jesus said, St. Peter has said things to Jesus that are beautiful little prayers. He says, for instance, on Mount Tabor, Lord, it's good to be here with you. That's a prayer. Lord, it's good to be here with you. I say it a lot. He said when he saw Jesus walking in the water, he says, Lord, if that's really you, would you call me to walk on the water towards you? Which Jesus does. I say that every morning, just like when you go into a tough situation, you feel you're not alone. I say, Lord, if that's really you, tell me to walk on the water towards you. In moments when I find myself sinking, I say with St. Peter, save me, Lord, I'm going to drown. I say to St. Peter, with St. Peter, Lord, you know everything. You know that I love you. Lord, to whom else shall I go? You and you alone have the words of everlasting life. Those are simple sayings of this very sinful guy that really disappointed Jesus in some ways, but Jesus never stopped loving him and forgiving him. And I borrow the expressions of St. Peter to spice up my prayers.
For obvious reasons, I favor St. Peter. So
you would. I
don't take credit for him, but I favor him. So we're coming to a time where, and the reason I look down is there are questions being sent to us to answer. So I'm going to do something, but I want to kind of transition into that. In an interview in 2017, you reflected on Christmas and Hanukkah. And in an article it was an interview that you had, and it was written up, and I loved it. You said, people walk in darkness, but what God is saying is, don't give up. The light is going to win. Goodness is going to be stronger than evil. Life is going to be stronger than death. And then you said, we need a little Christmas and Hanukkah right this very moment. I wonder if you would say the same thing about Passover and Easter this year.
As long as you don't make me sing it. We need a little Passover and Easter right this very moment. You bet we do.
Oh my goodness! So I have some questions that that some came in over the time that we were talking. So the question is they asked me to ask you what cultural changes you expect in this multidimensional crisis, medical, economic, social, emotional, that will create in America, and will the changes be long lasting? Particularly comment on regarding closeness with God and increase in religious service attendance.
Yeah, I'm glad the person asked you, and I had mentioned that earlier. I really believe there's going to be a revival. Again, it's only anecdotal, but the large number of people that have said to me, there's something stirring within me. Religion had gone dormant for so long. I was taking it for granted. So many people, Rabbi, are saying, we miss Mass. When can we get back to Holy Communion? I want to go to confession. I want to pray with my neighbors and friends and parishioners. They're sort of discovering what you and I know deep down, like the Psalm says, only in God is my soul at rest. Now, we all know that. That's an innate part of the human project. We go through life trying to deny that and try to live as if that's not true. An occasion like this can be a big alarm clock to remind us that we come from God and our hearts are restless until they return to him. And I think that's going to happen. I really do.
Yeah, I believe that this is going to reshape us in some unintended ways. I mean, there are going to be, unintentional benefits from this. I think in terms of the what we discover about ourselves and what religion and faith means to people. I hope this conversation in some way has helped in that. But I think that this issue of humility and vulnerability, and the sense that we are not totally in control as much as we would like to, it humbles us. And I think humility at this point is a good thing for us to have, even after this ends.
Yeah. Too, Rabbi, I wonder if something that you and I were initially going to talk about, I think, when you graciously invited me to the Y, we were going to speak about how to counteract the hatred, the vitriol, that we were seeing, especially against people of faith or religious minorities, different ethnic groups. I wonder too, and boy, I hope I'm not being a Pollyanna here, but I really wonder if there's going to be a heightened sense of amity and civility. When you see people like Donald Trump complimenting Andrew Cuomo, when you see Andrew Cuomo complimenting Bill de Blasio, I'm just using local examples. I think we've rediscovered a sense of cooperation. These guys aren't that bad. I was just on the phone with Senator Schumer, and he had been of tremendous help to us in this in the subsidies, as he was to the Jewish community too. As you know, in fact, he has a great call-in tomorrow among religious leaders, sponsored by a Jewish organization, and somebody who every time I see him makes a joke at Chuck Schumer's expense or criticizes him, says, he's not such a bad guy and he's really come through. If that sense of, if that kind of newfound sense of respect and concord, I think we might get a good dose of that, because they've seen, boy, we got to work together. We've just had an invisible virus that threatened literally to kill us, and we had to work together for it. So let's keep doing it.
Yeah, there's a Yiddish expression that translates to "from your lips to God's ears."
Yeah, yeah.
Right.
That one too.
As a matter of fact, I think the governor and I think the leaders of our state have passed a bill that's going to mobilize against hate. For and trying to marshal everybody in that regard. So there's one other question, not one other. I have 33 questions. So I'm not going to read them all, and I apologize to those who sent them in.
Your wife behind you sending in questions.
Yes, but we can have a house. By the way, I'm going to hold you to the promise to come back, and we're going to, when this is all passed, to really talk about confronting hate.
You're on.
Yeah. All right. So, what do you think the best way to have religious services for the people of New York who have died because of the pandemic should be handled? How should they be handled?
Yeah, and we got a lot of them. I was just I had mentioned to you earlier, I was at a burial earlier of one of my priests, and it's so heartbreaking, because not only is the family lost someone to whom they were very close, number two, they were unable to be with him or her leading up to the death, and number three, they're unable even to hug one another, to express sympathy. So I said to them, when this is over, we will have a memorial mass for your priest uncle. Rabbi, I'm thinking of having a big prayer service at St. Patrick's Cathedral, and I'm inviting you, where we ought to get everybody together to pray for those who have died. We did it, I'm told, at 9/11. I wasn't here at St. Louis. You were around. We did it at Sandy, didn't we? And let's do it again. Some of my priests, I've been so amazed and in admiration of the pastoral innovation of a lot of my priests, and they're doing it now. When somebody dies, they will have mass in the parish. The people can attend. It will be live streamed to the people, and his intention for the mass is the eternal repose of the person who's just died, and the families really get a lot of solace from that.
Mm-hmm. There's one question that is very particular to you, but I'm going to ask it because it may mean something to your constituents. Would it be dangerous to collect, well, this is obviously past, collect a branch, or in fact, I don't think it's about a palm branch as much as the issue of communion, especially because the Archdiocese of New York has decided against certain things. I mean, are you going, when it comes to communion, how are you handling that? How are you going to?
It's going to be sad, Peter. We can't, our people are unable to receive Holy Communion. That's what's sad. Because to receive Holy Communion, you have to come to Mass, and there has to be touching. The priest is touching the tongue or the hand of the person into which he places the Holy Eucharist. We can't do it. The only time we can do it now, Rabbi, is in danger of death. When a priest is called to the bedside for the sacraments of the anointing of the sick, and to give that person Holy Communion. It's very, very difficult for our people. They long for what they call the bread of life, the Holy Eucharist. And they're eager for that, but there's no substitute for that, and we can't do anything to replace that. Now, some of my priests are having, again, this innovation where they'll actually say from 10 to 11 on Sunday morning, I'll be at the entrance to the church. Please don't even get out of your car. Pull up one by one. I will give each person in the car Holy Communion. They obviously have their gloves on and a mask on. They sanitize afterwards. Some of them are doing that. So there's some pastoral creativity here. The bad news is 90% of our people are without the Holy Eucharist. The good news is 100% of our people miss it. So maybe there'll be a revived devotion and hunger there.
Yeah, for those priests, in Hebrew we say "kol hakavod," all the honor to them. I mean, that's
yeah,
and that's true of course, the doctors and all the the first responders that are heroic, beyond heroic. Here's a question: how do we cope with hate for those we feel are endangering the lives of others? People who are just blatantly. I saw something on the news about somebody in the Midwest who really has no concern about the fact that they went to church and they may be spreading it. How do you deal with the emotions of that moment and when you see that?
It's tough. What we got to say is, look, I find what he or she has said or has done to be hideous and nauseating. I don't want to descend to that level. So I don't want to get as raw and obnoxious against them as they are to us. I also feel, number two, Rabbi, because we feel who's gonna punish that person. Don't you and I, you were talking earlier about the wellspring of good and nobleness and gifts that is deep in the human heart. Don't you think those people, they need pity, not our hatred? Because if they're that vile, they must really be messed up inside.
Yeah.
If they are that hateful, there must just be a haunting lack of love within, and they're living a hell. And I think I kind of feel sorry for them.
Yeah, I think of Elie Wiesel's words, one of my heroes, who after he suffered a great loss, people asked him, how do you go on? He said with two words, and yet. In other words, there's hatred, and yet there could be love. There's war, and yet there could be peace. There's illness, and yet there can be a cure. And I think those words, and yet, gives us a hope and an optimism for the future. So we're coming to our time that we're going to have to sign off. So I'm going to give you an opportunity for a 90-second sermon. What would you say to me?
Okay, let me try my best. Now, I'm going to give a sermon without preparing it, but you're kind to think I usually prepare.
Your sermons, whether they're prepared or not, are exquisite jewels. So I'm just, whatever you say, I'm going to hang on every word.
Thank you, my friend. Let me say to you, Rabbi Peter Rubinstein, and let me say with all our listeners today, do you realize how grateful we should be? This is my sermon here, because we're kind of wrapped up in a lot of darkness, apprehension, and loneliness. And do you realize the gift that we have in one another? What other city in the world, what other country in the world could the Cardinal Archbishop sit with a prominent Jewish rabbi, with a distinguished audience, and talk about faith, and talk about hope, and talk about forgiveness, and talk about how we're going to get through this, and talk about the good that we're going to be able to reap because of the dangers that we're going through now. My brothers and sisters, I hope you could see what a revelation of God's love that is for us right now that's gone on the last hour. I hope there's been a little wisdom and insight that you've gotten. I sure have from Peter. I hope he has from me. I hope you all have from the two of us. But just the fact that we're together and that we've enjoyed it and that we trust one another and that we look to one another for some shared insights and learning. I would say, I'd borrow another word from you and say, Alleluia, but we can't use that word during Lent. I got to wait for Easter to that. So I'm just going to say, thanks be to God.
I would just say, the story of the Israelites passing through the water, we're reborn passing through the water. And, we all face the challenges of a wall of water. We all have our challenges, that impenetrable, unpassable thing that we're not going to be able to get through. And if Jewish history teaches me anything, it's that over and over and over again, we have made it to the other side. And God willing, we will put one foot in front of the other, step after step, so we don't fall on our face. And together, maybe not holding hands until we get to the other side, but at that point, what a great opportunity it will be to link arms and give hugs. And I'm looking forward to that. And friends, above all the gifts in my life, or with those, is my friendship with you. And I am so very grateful we were able to share this opportunity. Happy Easter.
I reciprocate. A blessed Passover.
Love to you all. Bye-bye.